Welcome to the Small Church Podcast, the podcast for church leaders who want to make a difference in their communities. We're your hosts, Tony Marr and Bruce Montgomery, and we're excited to be with you today. On this podcast, we'll be discussing the latest trends, strategies, and ideas for effective leadership in small-sized churches. So whether you're a pastor, a ministry leader, or a volunteer, this podcast is for you. Each week, we'll bring you interviews with experienced church leaders who have valuable insights to share. We'll also explore topics like team building, community outreach, spiritual growth, and much more. So if you're looking for practical advice and inspiration to help you lead your church with excellence, you've come to the right place. The Small Church Podcast is brought to you by Higher Ministries. Higher Ministries is an organization that exists to help Christian leaders in the churches they serve through coaching and consulting, all for little or no cost. For more information on Higher Ministries or to find out more about the Small Church Podcast, please visit higherministries.com. Thanks for tuning into this week's edition of the Small Church Podcast. Welcome to this edition of the Small Church Podcast. I'm your host, Tony Marr, along with my co-host, Bruce Montgomery. Bruce, you are still on vacation in Florida, but you were able to find some time to break away from the cornhole and the shuffleboard and join us this morning. How you doing?
I'm doing well. It's really hard to pull myself away from those events, but my wife's the one doing all the winning, so I can't sneak away and nobody misses me. So I'm glad to be here for this and be with you all this day and talk about something that's really important in my life. I've always worked with conflict management. You know, Tony and I have worked that together. Tony always calls it what did you call it, Tony? I just lost that. You call it conflict resolution. Yeah, that's how old I am. I lose those kind of things quickly, but a conflict resolution is not always possible. So I always call it conflict management. Either way, we're talking about the same thing, trying to resolve issues that could tear people apart, could create unhealthy relationships, could destroy church. Conflict is something that comes up, and the way we deal with it is going to determine how it comes out. And I just think that it's a very, very big thing. I told Tony this morning when I was looking at studying organizational communication, the first person in America who was an organizational consultant and actually paid by organizations, institutions, not churches, institutions, paid them to deal with problems and conflict in the institution. His first advice was, have you talked to him? Go tell him. Yeah, because most of the time we don't talk to the person we're mad at or we have the conflict with. We talk to everybody else and try to rally support or do different things. And where do you think that came from?
Where did that
Go
come
tell
from?
him. It came from the book of Matthew in chapter 18. If your brother sins, go and show him his fault in private. If he listens to you, you've won your brother. But if he does not listen to you, take one or two more with you. So by the mouth of two or three witnesses, every fact may be confirmed. And if he still refuses to listen, then treat him like a Gentile. That is pretty blatant. And I don't know, Tony, how many times in a church you've had to do that, but I've had to do that many times. And it's not pleasant to go into, but when you come out of it, it's a very pleasant thing because there's peace. And so I think it's something that we want to work on, and especially church leaders and small church leaders. You're afraid of upsetting somebody and them taking off and leaving you and taking people with them. You've got to be able to face up to things in a loving way and try to work things out.
Well, Bruce, we're talking about navigating conflict this week on our podcast, and it's something that, from one of my earliest recollections of a conversation with you, you made a statement that I have repeated probably 1,000 times over the course of my life and ministry, and that's that conflict is inevitable, and whenever two or more people gather together, conflict will arise, and while conflict is evident, conflict is present in any organization, I think that conflict is especially prevalent in the church. We tend to see conflict creeping up personal issues, congregational issues, organizational issues. It seems like there's never any shortage of conflict in the church.
What you quoted is true. I think that one of the things that Tom Mullins had said in a book, wherever two or three are gathered together, someone spills milk. In every relationship, conflict doesn't have to be over big things. In a marriage, conflict may be you keep getting up too early, or you do this, and things you can do. Anything you come where you don't just really agree with it, and also with conflict, if the other person has to know about it, or it's not conflict. If you're just mad at somebody and you go to church, and this is where I think Tony's right. It's one of the largest organizations in the country, in the world, and we do so little research on it because I don't know why, because I guess it's a voluntary organization, and people don't want to break the ice with things. But if anybody conflict, what if you didn't have conflict? Let me change the angle just a little bit, Tony. What if the church did not have any conflict?
Well, it would be a much nicer place to attend.
It would be a nicer place to go to and be like the Garden of Eden. We're there and everything's happy. But would the church move forward?
I think that the church would probably be stagnant in that situation, and it would probably be very, very fake.
So a church that really has no conflict whatsoever, no disagreement whatsoever, is probably a candidate for stagnation and death. So conflict is not a bad thing. That's the one thing I think we have to get out of our minds. That conflict is evil. It's not a bad thing. It is something where maybe two people just disagree about how much of this we should do, how much of this, and if they can get together then and collaborate together, like Matthew 18 says, to work together to go through his fault. And if he'll agree with you and listen to you, you restored a brother. If we have that in mind, we can go ahead and move forward. I don't have to agree with everything that a person in the congregation or everything in the leadership says, but I do have to agree to agree with that. I have to how do I say it? I have to go along and offer change possibilities, but not go off and have a war somewhere with somebody. So I think conflict is something that can bring growth. It can also bring destruction, and it's all in how we handle it.
So Bruce, what do you see? What do you see are some of the common types of conflict that we see arise in the church setting?
I was talking to you earlier this morning. I wrote down some: Zoom or no Zoom, drums or no drums. I've been in churches where as soon as somebody brings in a drum, people leave. Color of the front door. I grew up in a neighborhood where there's one church in the neighborhood who changed the color of their front door every month because nobody could agree what to do it. So each family took a month and painted the front door of the church whatever color they wanted. That was their way of agreeing with it. So at least they agreed with it and did it. Worship style. All of those kind of things I think are there. That potentially have caused problem. And I believe and I pray we're coming out of the music conflicts and the music wars. I think those are all done. People may not be satisfied with what the answer is, but I think we're through that mostly. I pray we're through that and allow people to have the kind of worship they want. Even if you have to have two styles in the church, and then two services, that's fine. And we still have that same togetherness. We are interdependent. And that's another part of conflict. We are interdependent. We need each other.
Bruce, do you think that most of the conflict that we see in the church is personal preference, that something is happening that we personally don't agree with or don't like? Or do you think that conflict that we see in church settings is more philosophical, more theological, or do you think it's a combination of all of it?
I think it's a combination of all of it, but also an unwillingness to change. I think it's less the higher level, Tony, less the theological, than it is the practical. How we live together in community, and are we living together in community, or are we living together in different camps that meet in the same building? And that's the thing I think we have to work on. For a small church, conflict can be devastating, but that doesn't mean you have to give in every time. I've always shared with people that there are 5 ways that people deal with conflict when it comes on. Some people just withdraw. They don't want conflict. They don't like conflict, so they just walk away. And you do it. I'm mad. I'm not going to do it. Whatever you do, that's what we're going to do. And that's not a way to really deal successfully with conflict. It's almost like children moving away. So you can withdraw by taking your presence away, or you can withdraw by just not ever saying anything and not accommodating to things. And how's that work out for you? I think that for people who want to withdraw, how's it work out? You're always going to be unhappy, thinking people are not listening to you or picking on you, but you're not ever engaged in the conversation to get your opinion in there so they can be dealt with. And then some people accommodate. They just say, all it doesn't make you happy. And I don't really not like this, but I'm not going to make everybody unhappy, so I'll just do what they say. And then competition, where we force it. And there are people in churches and people in every organization who are forcing their own agenda or forcing something, and we have to be able to look at that. And then there's compromise and collaboration. Those are the 5 ways. And I, in classes in college at the university, I many times had people say compromise was the best answer. Compromise is not the best answer.
You both lose.
People who wanted something different. 2 people who wanted something different fought until one of them won. The competition, a compromise, and so it's a form of competition. Compromise is not something where we work together with somebody. We're working opposed to somebody. The one that I really think that answers the question for the church is collaboration, or developing consensus. If I have a problem with somebody, my first thing is go tell them. The second thing is, as we talk together, how can we together work on this problem, and enlist a person who's not really agreeing with you, and see what their ideas are, and see if you can get collaboration and work together, and not against each other. And that's how the church, I think, is designed to work. It's designed to work with people working together and coming together, not always even agreeing entirely with the answer, but agreeing enough to go along and help the thing come about. And so I think that to me, it requires, in our outline, Tony, it requires empathy and active listening and understanding, trying to manage those conflicts. So, what have you seen, Tony, in churches when conflict comes?
Well, Bruce, I think the biggest thing that we see in the churches with people is a passive-aggressive mindset, that a lot of times people don't want to address the conflict head on. And in our world of social media now, a lot of the conflict, I think, takes place behind anonymity. That someone can post something online. A lot of the guys that I meet with and talk with, they say they dread Sunday afternoons because they know that someone is going to post something on Facebook or on Twitter or Instagram that has some sort of comment about the church service. Probably most likely directed towards them and their teaching, their sermon. And a lot of times they do so under the guise of anonymity, and so they don't have to look you in the face. They don't have to get any kind of rebuttal or see the reaction from you. They can say whatever they want. They can get their message out there, their attacks out there, and don't have to deal with any of the consequences or repercussions of that. And it makes leading in a church setting difficult when people can say whatever they want without the accountability for the words that they're saying. And then when you try to address that with someone, if it's someone that you do know, and you try to address that with them, oftentimes in the small church setting, everyone who's in your church. And so unless they're just posting anonymously, in which case you can probably narrow it down to figure out who it was that said it. But it's someone that you know that is saying something maybe directly or indirectly that is a comment about you or about the church or about your sermon. And then when you go to address it with them, I think that most people in our culture, in our society today, they don't like the face-to-face direct dealing with an issue. And so they will blow it off. They will say, no, that's not what they meant. And then they can turn right around and say whatever they want again online.
Right. I'm telling you, I've never even thought about that kind of an activity with people. I know that passive aggression is a way most people, many people take, because they can say whatever they want and not be accountable for it, and they can hurt, and that, if anything, will cripple the church more than anything else. I remember when I was preaching, and it was in a larger church. One of the Sunday school teachers got upset because of something that went on. And I think it was probably music-wise, and we really hadn't gone too radical, but probably musical-wise. And I didn't catch on to it at first. But I didn't see him I didn't see him in church for about 4 or 5 weeks. And I asked somebody about him, and it says, well, he teaches class and then he goes to his car and leaves. And so I just actually told my youth minister, you're in charge of the service till I get back. And I went out in the parking lot and waited for him in his car. And we had a talk, and it was loving. I wasn't rebuking, and he wasn't rebuking, but I said, what are you doing? This is you're demonstrating against something you don't like. This is what you might do in an industry somewhere and to hurt people. We're in the church. We work together. We don't do those kind of things. You got a problem? Tell me. And if I got a problem, I'll tell you. And my problem right now is you're making a big deal of leaving the building and in front of all the people you have in your Sunday school class, and you make a big deal of that, and then you don't talk to me. You don't let me know what's going on. And so that went into another conversation, and eventually he came back, taught Sunday school again, and I never had any more problems. But it just takes people lovingly to take the courage to talk, and not to hide behind masks or hide behind a Facebook thing. That's a sin that is gonna bite them sometime later, because you can't keep doing that to people. And as far as ministers, if you see it and there's there and there's no name on it, don't even read it. I would just delete it, because if they don't have the courage to put their name on it, then I don't need the time to read that kind of garbage. And for those of you who are getting that kind of difficulty, boy, I tell you, find some people who are supportive of you, and find some people who will help you collaborate your way through some of the issues that are raised. But don't let it destroy you, and don't listen to it. It is meant to destroy you. It's not meant to lift you up.
Bruce, in my years of ministry experience, I've had several times where you get the phone call or the email from someone who says, hey, can I set up a time to get together with you? I've got a few issues that I want to talk with you about. I think everyone who's ever been in ministry, in vocational ministry, has had that email or that phone call. And when you're counting down the days until that meeting takes place, depending on who it's with, the anxiety builds in you. Okay, what is this about? How can someone prepare for those moments, for those meetings, for those critical conversations that we know are about to take place, but we're not quite sure what they're going to be about? How can we prepare for those?
Yeah, I remember telling you a long time ago, I loaned you a book, Critical Conversations, and I know you read it and liked it. And there's not a total way to prepare for that, except to pray and to lovingly pray for the person who has the issue with you, or issue that he wants to bring up. And when they do come in, welcoming way, loving way, maybe even start the conversation with prayer. But the things I would say to you, if they come up to you during the church service or after the church service and want to give you bad news, pull them away from a crowd. Don't let them get into a situation where both voices raised and a bunch of people watch. An audience always makes a bully want to do more. So get them away from that. And the other way is when they come in, agree with them. Yeah, I can see your point. I can see this. I can see this. I can't see this. And you don't have to agree with everything, but show some agreement. But I think that the worst part is that, like you said, it's like waiting for somebody to come who has something to say. Sometimes that I've had that happen, and it's something positive. And I spent all that time grieving about something, and it was something that we really agreed upon. But if it's coming, be ready and be lovingly ready to listen to what they say and listen to their story, and then share your story and how you see their story, and see if you can get not his story or her story and my story, get our story. And it doesn't help you with your question entirely, Tony, about what you do in the middle, because I don't know exactly that I handle that always very well. But there's some sleepless nights and things that go on. So I like to shorten the time before we get together, so I don't have that much time to think of all the horrible things that go on. And I try my very best during that time to think of positive things.
I think our natural tendency is to be defensive.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
how do we avoid the temptation to be defensive and, like you said, be agreeable and open to what they have to say, that maybe there's something that we can actually learn from this, grow from this, and can propel us forward?
I think part is to go in with the idea of being agreeable. You find agreement in something. Find any agreement, any big agreement. Find a small agreement you can get, and when you do that, then start there and work out from that agreement to the other things. Again, like I said, there are things I would always do, and when they came to meet me, I would have them sit down, because if they're angry or agitated, it's harder to keep the juices flowing if you're sitting down. So I would sit them down. I would talk to them in a very soft voice. I would find things that I can agree with them and not lie to them, but agree. I can see why you would feel that way. I can see this, and then try to move towards some way in which you can work together to solve the problem. And if it's the music style, that's not always going to happen. And are you the only one who needs to be pleased? That was the problem with that person who left and went up and left his car and in the parking lot and waited a while and then left. He didn't like the music style. He didn't like the change, and it wasn't even radical. We hadn't even gotten rid of hymn books. And so I'd ask, is this a biblical issue for us? If it's a biblical issue, let's deal with it. If it's a personal issue, let's deal with it. But let's put it in the right context. If so somebody's coming up with a problem, I don't like this about the church. Well, is it a biblical issue? Is the church doing something that's wrong? Are people in the church doing something wrong? Are they following the scripture? And you just don't like the way it's coming out, and try to get a conversation with them. And if you can't get an agreement between the two, and it's important, and then may I bring one of the elders in? May I bring somebody else in here to help us to work through this problem, so that there is some way to find a way to get done. But I always want to enlist a person who's there to work with me than against me.
Bruce, one of the things that I'm interested to hear your input on is we've got two churches that I'm aware of right now, that ministers that I work with that are having conflict in their congregations, that someone in their congregation was upset about something that happened or didn't happen, and instead of coming to the pastor, they went to someone else, to an elder or someone else, and then the elders came to the pastor Or in one situation, a family came to the pastor and said, someone else has this issue with you. And going back to your Matthew 18 principle, how should the pastor in that situation address that when they're not being given the opportunity to directly address the person who has the issue with them? They have someone else coming to them. They've bypassed the beginning of the Matthew 18 principle of go to the person, and they went directly to the elders or to some other person in leadership in the church to convey their message of disappointment in their behalf.
Well, that's still that's a very still part of that passive aggressive structure. If somebody tells me that there's something that somebody else has said that they're upset with, the first thing I would ask them is, may I talk to the other person? You give me permission to talk about our conversation with the person you're talking about. And if they say no, then I'm kind of hamstrung at that point. But I've got to find a way to, and you know what it's like trying to find a way then to get to that person. And I just may walk up and say, hey, Joe, I've heard you're kind of just unhappy about something. Can we have a talk? And again, the same person who had the music issue had a Super Bowl issue, and I heard about it from other people. But I went to him after getting their permission. I went to him and his wife, and we talked. And again, we came to a solution. In your words, we resolved that. Not always regretfully can we resolve a conflict. If somebody is that bent on destruction, that bent on being a passive aggressive person, and trying to hide under somebody else or hide under the internet, and doesn't want anything there, I doubt they would even have a meeting with you. Just because that means they have to have the courage to face you. But if they will, face them with love. Don't go in with guns of fire, and face them with love. I heard this and I couldn't believe it, but I want to find out if it's true, or how can we've got a problem. How can we work our way through it? And again, try to enlist them in solving the problem. That to me is the biggest issue. Collaboration. We work together, and that means we try to come to agreement. And when leadership comes together in a board meeting or elders meeting, I look for consensus. I don't to be the idea when we come to that and somebody has won the competition, that's going to come back and bite us. And if we compromise, that's going to come back and bite us. It's only going to be a good decision if it's an important decision if we agree.
So what if you can't reach the consensus?
Then I don't do it. If I can't reach the consensus over an issue, I'm not going to forget the issue, but I'm not going to violate it. Oftentimes it's an action or something. And if say let's talk about the church door. If everybody wants a church door ribbed except somebody else and they're holding out badly, it's not big enough to fight. At that point, let's do it. So you have to decide which fight you're going to fight. And in a small church, you may have more fights than others, but fight the fights that you need to fight, and it's okay to withdraw at sometimes. It's okay to accommodate it sometimes, but stay away from competition, and work with collaboration, and work things through. Compromise is not winning things. It's when we compromise, somebody lost. I'm looking for people to be in a win-win situation, and that's the goal that will leave us in love. That's the goal that will help us deal with conflict down the road, and just continually, lovingly, deal with those people. Don't let their anger, don't let their methods destroy you, but shower love on them. Just shower love, and agree when you can, But that's the best answer I can have for that. It does come to the point, and Matthew says it does come to a point if you got a person and all they're doing is causing trouble. All they're doing is causing trouble. And you've got agreement from the elders and things. You go see them. If that doesn't work, take somebody else with you. Yeah. It's not just he sees this. I see that same thing too. We want to help you, and if they still don't change, I've been involved in a few times where I've had to ask somebody to leave a congregation, or in campus minister had to have a student just tell a student, this is not who we are, and we're not going to be a good fit for you, and you're just causing us trouble, so we don't want you around. And most all those times, I say many, but actually every one of those times, sometime later, that student came back or that person came back to me and apologized. And some of them we restored the body actively. Some of them just kind of were more on the fringe, but at least we dealt with the issue. If we leave it alone, then I think that we're in a real hurt, because it's going to keep coming back up. It's like have you done I'm here at a resort. Have you done a floaty and you've got that big old floaty and you're trying to get it all underwater, but something keeps popping up?
Yeah,
that's kind of what's happened if you don't really deal with the conflict when it's there.
So Bruce, we've got a lot of small church pastors that are listening to the show, and inevitably, if you're a pastor in a small church, they've dealt with conflict. They're probably dealing with some sort of conflict right now. What do you see are some of the essential skills that are needed to navigate conflict management? And what are some practical tips and strategies that you could give someone listening to this? Maybe someone who's new to ministry, or maybe it's someone who's been in ministry for decades, and this is an issue that they've really struggled with. What are some practical tips and strategies that you could give for developing and enhancing our skills? Because it is a skill to be able to navigate conflict.
Yeah, and it's hard because each person has their own way of dealing with things. And when I think about conflict, I'm not a person who likes conflict. I don't like it at all. And for me, learning to be able to go to people and be lovingly confrontive and to talk about it, I don't like that. But as soon as I know I've got to do it, I do it. Because if I don't do it, if I put it off, then it's going to build up. The resentment inside of me, or the fear inside me, is going to continue to grow as long as I don't address what's going on. And so, yeah. Well, what if they get mad and what if they leave? What if they do? If they're staying here causing you grief, and they're not happy in the church, they'd be happier someplace else. And so you take a chance, take an elder, let the pray for them. Pray for them as best you can, and continue to have a prayerful attitude with them. And again, it goes back to when you do talk with them, try to find agreement early on. Try to keep them away from an audience. Don't put them in a place where there's an audience, because people play to audiences. So you want to be away from things. I don't think anybody. I've had times where someone's come up to me right after a service and just yelled, "You didn't do this," and I really had, but they didn't know it. And so it was a lose-lose if I stood there toe-to-toe with him and fought with him. And so I said, let's go over here, and we'll go into the Sunday school classroom. Let's close the door. Let's sit down. Let's now, what is you really talking about? And to try to work it through again, so that we're working together about something instead of against something. If you're angry because I didn't go see your mother in a hospital, are you sure I wasn't there? Because one time I had been to the mother a couple of times, nobody was there, so I left cards. They didn't pay attention to that, and so I had neglected their mother, and I knew I hadn't, but I didn't come back and yell at them. I just tried to say, I left a card. I'll leave a card the next time. I will not wake your mother if I go to see her again. I don't do that. People don't know how much rest people's got in the hospital, so I try to be considerate, and just try to talk with them practically and lovingly as you can, and don't let it erupt. And then if you can't, and I'm going right back down to that scripture. Still, if you can't get agreement or get people to work with you on that side, then bring somebody else in, bring another person in, and let them say, "Here's how I see this, Joe. You're not totally wrong. You're not, but you're not totally right, and you need to see what's going on." And so I think it's your attitude, you telling your story, and you listening to their story, and responding to that. And that's some things we had down in our notes for people to do is to be there, to care, to you offer them love no matter what, and then discuss what you can do to improve. And sometimes if I have a person who comes to me and it's, or we just I'll say the youth group's doing this, and the kids are really getting running while they're doing this. We need to fix that. One of my answers is that since you've noticed it, why don't you help us fix it? Why don't you be a part of that solution again? I don't want a target out there that we're working to in many different directions. We want to have one arrow going to the target, and that's the only way is going to be to lovingly come to some kind of a management of the conflict. And it's not horrible if somebody leaves.
Well, that's all the time that we have for this edition of the Small Church Podcast. You'll want to check in next week for part 2 of our conversation on how to navigate conflict within your church. If you've enjoyed this episode of the podcast, you should comment on social media. Let us know your thoughts, your questions, anything that you would like for us to address. If you have a story to share, you can contact us on all of the social media platforms. Subscribe to the Small Church Podcast and be sure that you get each new episode when it drops every Tuesday morning. For more information on the Small Church Podcast or more information on Higher Ministries to begin your own journey, please visit us at www.higherministries.com. Again, thanks for tuning in for the Small Church Podcast, and we'll talk to you next week.